The State of Football, Part 36 here on September 21st, 2020. No place I'd rather be. Rick Serritella telling it like it is when it comes to the NFL draft and everything football on the State of Football. Hot topics, hot debates, industry experts. Of course, my co-host each and every day, John Murphy, down in New Orleans, VP of the Toronto Argonauts. And of course, helping with the NFL Draft Bible here, we've got a great new article, Scouting the Nation with our top prospects. We'll be promoting that this morning. And of course, NEC Ralph, make sure you follow him. He's got his axe sharpened, ready to go, always chopping it up here on another Football Monday edition. We'll recap the weekend that was. We'll give you some of the NFL draft prospects that caught our attention from those college football games. We'll talk about the slew of injuries. I've never seen so many TV timeouts, and I've seen a lot of TV timeouts. But, man, especially that 49ers-Jets game, it was like, hey, it was more commercial than game time, no doubt about that. But we start off with a Sunday night thriller, a rematch between the Seahawks and the Patriots. John, I'll start it off with you. It was like the Super Bowl all over again, deja vu. The game comes down to a 4th and goal situation, role reversal. As you know, the Seahawks taking plenty of criticism and heat for passing it in the Super Bowl on 4th and 1. New England flips it and runs it on 4th and 1 with big old Cam Newton, which they had a lot of success doing throughout the evening, but Seattle knew it was coming. They go up the gut. And, boy, I know Cam thinks he's Superman, but he's trying to leap from, like, the 3 or 4 yard line into the end zone. Just a little bit short there, Cam.
Yeah, he's not 23-year-old Cam Newton anymore. Maybe not quite Superman, a little more Clark Kent. And I thought for sure coming out of that timeout that we were going to see a Jumbo Elliott touchdown. I thought for sure they had them all set up for that beef, that big package in there, and you're going to see Cam fake it and throw it to whatever 4th string tight end that, Belichick and them have. I think that's what it sets up for the future, though, that, somewhere down the road, we're going to see that same situation, that same kind of package, and now they're going to get them with a run action, and the quarterback either coming out the back end, or being able to roll out and throw an easy touchdown to somebody. Yeah, I still think, as much as you see what you see out of Russell Wilson, and I mean, he has almost as many touchdown passes so far this year as he does incompletions. And even last night, he threw 6 touchdowns. Now, 5 of them were for his team, and 1 of them was for the Patriots. So he's scoring for everybody. So I think when you look at Seattle, you see a team that's in the thick of it, and that whole division, I think, is still undefeated. So, I mean, you're in a hell of a division right now with the way that the Rams have bounced back and played, and your favorite, Kyler Murray and the Cliff Kingsburys, undefeated. And now you look at the Niners, and we'll get into them with their injury situation since, it's going to be an interesting scenario, at least for the next month, to see how the Niners come out of things. They got to at least come out of it 500, playing without likely a number of their high-end guys. But I think the other thing that came out of it is, the Patriots are not completely dead yet. Now I think you saw some wrinkles. If you can throw against them the way that Seattle did, that's a brand new wrinkle because Stephen Gilmore looked very average against DK Metcalf. And the other thing I think you saw was that Newton is healthy enough to play pretty well. Well, the rest of that division outside of the Bills isn't ready for prime time. So the Patriots are going to get at least four more wins out of that division. So at worst, they're going to go 4-2 in that division because the Jets and the Dolphins are not ready to play, against even the worst team out of those two. And so I think if you're the Patriots, I think you're feeling as good for a loss going out to Seattle, having it turn out to be a 1-score game all the way to the finish, but seeing that Cam Newton was making some throws, they made some plays. I mean, Edelman made 2 of the best plays you'll ever see and one of them's against Jamal Adams. So I think you're comfortable with what you saw as the Patriots and the Seahawks. It's what we've been saying. Like, hey, this team is probably as good as advertised, and they too, like everyone seemingly, as of week 2, already playing without some of their best players and played a whole second half with literally their third, fourth string safeties and a third and sometimes fourth string corner, in there for multiple reasons. Diggs getting kicked out, a pair of injuries in the second half, and they kept on playing and playing well. But I think the one thing, if you saw with Seattle, if I was looking to the future, is they have to figure out a way to generate a pass rush. If not, you will lose a game like this, down the road to a similar type team. If you're playing the Packers, if you're playing, against Kyler Murray, if you can't control those guys and you can't get them off their point, eventually you'll get outscored.
Yeah, I would say that's the one lacking repertoire in that Seahawks defense. Jamal Adams, probably the best pass rusher on that team right now, but you see him kind of justify the price tag, what he brought to the table, kind of as an X factor there. When you get a quarterback like Cam Newton, Jamal Adams is a guy that can kind of erase that X factor, and he's also pretty good against the tight ends there too. You mentioned Diggs. I thought that was a BS call. He had every right to be upset about getting tossed for that hit because, I listened to the broadcast announcers like break it down in slow motion. Oh, well, he could have did this. He could have did that. Like, you clearly don't know what you're talking about because it's a bang, bang play. When you have two forces of on-speed collision coming at each other, there's nothing you can do. And so I appreciate the way he handled that. He could have been very upset. I would have been upset. DK Metcalf, it's amazing this guy lasted until the 64th pick in the NFL draft. Just unbelievable. And, I will kind of shift gears over to our guy, Ralph Ventre, if he wants to chime in on that game. But also, John mentioned that AFC East, that we'll talk a little bit about the Bills and the Jets. I had a chance to see this Jets game. Unfortunately, here at the Jersey Shore, I was treated to a matinee doubleheader of the Giants and Jets. Oh, boy, how lucky we were. And, we were chatting here before we hit the air. You could combine both of these rosters, and they're still not making the playoffs. And we'll talk about the Giants' problems in just a second. But, Ralph, you've got the 49ers backups pounding on the Jets. I mean, no D Ford. Nick Bosa goes out. The other lineman goes out. You've got the backups. You got the backup quarterback. And you talk about the coaching in New England where Bill Belichick can put together a game plan despite the lack of weapons. I mean, the Jets, for crying out loud, Josh Malone is your biggest playmaker. Hey, let's find out how to get the ball in Josh Malone's hands. Can we throw him a screen pass? Can we work him on an end around? Hey, it's Josh Malone on the kick return. Like, are you kidding me? The Jets and Adam Pace, what are we waiting for? Get this guy out of town.
Well, it's a tough position for the Jets to be in, especially without Crowder yesterday, because he's one of the only weapons they had when Crowder and Bell weren't going to play. I mean,
Perryman too.
Poor Sam Darnold is just kind of hung out to dry. But I got to say, Rick, if you're in the New York TV market and you're going to have to watch the Giants and Jets all season, now is the perfect time to invest in the DirecTV Sunday ticket, because I don't know how you could subject yourself to Giants-Jets for the next 15 weeks, or at least buy the red zone. Focus on that. Heck, put on the radio or something. But it's going to be a long year for New York football fans. It looks like before we dive into that, before we talk about the NFC East, I wanted to go back to Seattle. You mentioned DK Metcalf, and how did he last so long? Really, he's a physical specimen. And I never viewed him in this particular way until I saw something on Twitter last night. But Andre Reed, Hall of Fame receiver, during the game last night, he put out a tweet. He said that DK Metcalf reminded him of a Terrell Owens, of a T.O., just because of the size, the strength, and the speed. And when I thought about it, it kind of hit home with me. And obviously, you have a long way to go to live up to T.O.'s career. But definitely, you see the potential there, at least with the physical attributes. And his performance has been great, usually with receivers, or I should say sometimes with receivers, it takes them a while to become acclimated to the NFL game. You see a first-round draft pick, and he may not do much his first year, and it may be a slow progression. And what I've noticed is usually like year 3 is the big takeoff year for those receivers. But Metcalf has been producing really from the start, and an intriguing player. As far as one other thing, by the way, if you would have told me that we would have had a Jumbo Elliott reference to start off the show, I mean, John taking us back there to the 90s. The kids don't even know who that is nowadays, John. You got to update the references there. But the big tackle, or was he a tackle for the New York Giants, of course. But anyway, I digress.
At least Vrabel, they might remember.
Yeah, Vrabel, or who's the latest guy now? J.J. Watt, with catching a whatever. Yeah, so. But, I mean, when it comes to the AFC East, the Jets are at the bottom. The Dolphins, they're scrappy. They're not bad. They're really not bad. I like what Brian Flores is doing there. I like his approach. I like his demeanor. He reminds me a lot of a Sean McDermott type who's having success with the Bills. And I think Miami may be on its way. They're just behind in the rebuilding process. But I think they at least have a program in place, and I think they're making some kind of progression. Whereas the Jets, I really think it's time for them to start from square one. It's pretty crazy how they're just wasting Darnold and also hampering his development in the meantime.
Yeah, I never liked bringing on a new GM and keeping the existing coach because it rarely works. And so now you hear Ralph mention the Jets have to start again. They just brought in a new GM, so now they keep the GM, maybe get a new coach. But it seems like both the Jets and Giants, John, and I hate to make this a chop shop just butchering up the Giants and Jets every single week. But again, this is the third offseason that Gettleman has had to fix this roster. I think I saw a stat. The Giants are 0-2 to start the season in like 7 of the past 8 years. I mean, you cannot just – when you get out of the gate 0-2, it's such a difficult hole to dig yourself out of. And now, I saw everybody all giddy. Hey, it's the first time that the – Daniel Jones is going to have Sterling Shepard and Golden Tate and Evan Ingram and Saquon Barkley on the field all at the same time. And I was going to put out a tweet and say, well, what's the over-under for how long that lasts? Not to make light of the situation. Unfortunately, Saquon Barkley out for the season. He's hurt again, second consecutive year. But when does it ever end for the New York Giants? I know they gave an effort there at the end, made it close. But, man, at some point in time, to Ralph's point, you've got to get this thing right, blow it up, and start it all over again.
Well, I mean, I think that the Jets and Giants maybe have forgotten the factor. We already have the Bengals and the Lions. So you don't need to just play like this. We already have teams that play like this on the regular. We've now just added the factor that in the biggest market, you have 2 teams that are just god-awful. And you look in the other biggest market, you have the Rams who have, found their way, at least early in the season, and you have a Chargers team that's very watchable and exciting yesterday after what you saw. Not exciting for the reason he had to play, but exciting for how he played. But I think you look at some of the things. I mean, the Giants, yeah, you bounce back, good effort. So, I mean, that kind of gives you a little hope with Joe Judge that the message is still, kind of above water, with a large majority of his roster by how they played down the stretch. But we all remember the Jets at one point saying they were the best 0-2 or 0-3 team, in pro football. Well, the Bears might be the worst 2-0 team, in football right now. So, let's kind of cool your jets on what they did. And I think a very easy New York, New Jersey reference for what the Jets currently have is they have a Fugazi as their head coach. So he may be a Gase, but he is a Fugazi as a head coach because, Jesus, I love the factor, and I hate him on the air because he's just a pain in the ass with how he says a lot of things. But Mike Greenberg might be correct. This guy might not be suitable for your kids' team, let alone, a professional team. And even some of the answers, that's what, if I'm on that roster or I'm in that front office or I'm even just a season ticket holder, listening to say like, hey, why do you do this on this down and distance? And did you not realize that Gore had just run 3 plays and was out of the game and you're turning and handing off to Josh Adams? Oh, well, yeah, I guess that was the case, but, things happen. Well, like things happen. You're in charge of those things happening. I'm just not sure that, when they've done this stuff, are they all on the same page? Because I think when you're in New York, especially, you cannot continually hire these kind of head coaches. Ben McAdoo and Fugazi cannot get hired as head coaches in a New York market. I mean, the only part of the interview I need to see out of those guys is doing a mock interview and seeing how those two guys, are like Rocky and Bullwinkle in front of the camera when they get interviewed. And it's like, okay, yeah, I don't care how you can draw an offense or on the board, or I don't care what you've done with quarterbacks. If you're that bad in front of the camera, it's going to be neutralized no matter what you were doing because they're just horrible. So you can't be the face of the franchise, and be that bad, in that part of the game. And then I think that there's nothing that makes me see, wasting Darnold is going to, it almost sounds like it's going to be a television, reality television show of its own, because that's what you're going to get out of this kid. And then if you're the Giants, now you have 2 years of what you've had injury-wise with Barkley. So now the next big question is going to come for whoever, is going to make it. Do you, put on that money for the 5th year? Do you sit there and accept his 5th year, at some point coming off, a torn right ACL as a running back, even at his age, for that amount of money might be something that is too rich for your blood, when you might have to really see what he still is and then make that decision after the 5th year. But I mean, that's going to be a very tenuous situation and decision, that you're going to have to make. And if you're playing basically the rest of the stretch, and you see this week, neither one of them has an easy road, to deal with, right? They're dealing with the Giants, dealing with the Niners, who don't want to play on that turf, after all the injuries they suffered yesterday. And the Jets, they get a trip out to the Colts, and that should turn out about as well as yesterday turned out. So it's going to be real quick that most Jet fans on a Sunday afternoon, and Giants fans for that matter, the best thing you can be doing with your Sunday afternoon is reading the PDF version of the NFL Draft Bible, since that's where your season is headed.
Well, thank God for the Yankees, because it's September 21st and the Giants and Jets season is over.
It's right next to the Mets.
Exactly. Ralph, we don't want to make you feel bad, so we'll talk about your Bills.
First of all, I got to give a shout out to John for another great reference. Rocky and Bullwinkle, throwing it back. Adam Gase and Ben McAdoo like Rocky and Bullwinkle. Now the kids it's Phineas and Ferb. Those are the big ones now.
No, because Phineas and Ferb have way too much personality for those two guys.
But the one thing, though, you mentioned I'm a Bills fan, Rick, and as somebody in the AFC East, when you find out that Adam Gase is staying in the AFC East and going to the Jets, you're a happy fan. Like that's the bottom line. I think even Jets fans really said, did they really hire him? Like, were they not just watching the Dolphins for the last few years? And did they not see the regression of Ryan Tannehill? And now we're going to bring him in to mentor our young quarterback?
Or better, the ascension of Ryan Tannehill after he left Adam Gase. Yep. And then you watch Kenyon Drake actually become a real player after he leaves Miami. I don't want to spend the entire show beating down the Giants and Jets, but I will say this. It's going to be another ugly loss when they play Indy. I don't see how Gase survives it. And honestly, the best thing Adam Gase ever gave to us was that taco meme with the eyes. I mean, that stuff is gold. But let's talk about some quarterbacks and teams that are exciting us, Ralph. Of course, Josh Allen, as you know, the first quarterback in franchise history to throw for over 400 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 0 interceptions, I believe. Not even the great Jim Kelly with the K-Gun offense was able to accomplish that. And I'll give you 2 for 1. Justin Herbert, I mean, how about this kid? He finds out a half hour before the game he's going to make his first career NFL start. He did not prepare for this. Obviously, he took second-team reps. The game plan was devised for Tyrod Taylor to be the starting quarterback. In comes Herbert, and for all the good that we've patted Anthony Lynn on the back for, the one thing I disagree with, he said, if Tyrod Taylor's healthy, he's our starting quarterback. Bad decision there.
Yeah, whether Anthony Lynn likes it or not, they have a quarterback controversy brewing in L.A. I almost said San Diego, but they're out there in L.A. now. We'll talk about that in a minute. I got to get to Josh Allen, and it just feels so good. I don't want to pat myself on the back, and I'm not a draft expert, and I don't edit the draft Bible. But for the little that I do follow the draft, I loved this kid coming out. And everybody in Buffalo, or a lot of folks in Buffalo, were of the let's draft the other Josh Rosen. And he's so pro-ready, and he did it at a big stage at UCLA in the Pac-12. And Josh Allen's coming from Wyoming, and he's inaccurate. But the bottom line is, Josh Allen's physical attributes are incredible. You start right there. There aren't too many people built like that in the world. I mean, the athletic ability, the rocket arm, the 6'5" stature, 230-pound frame. So you see all this potential right there. And if you just had to say to yourself, if this guy has half of a brain and he can commit to learning at an NFL level, he's going to, at the very least, be a solid NFL starting quarterback. But at the best, he has MVP potential, and you're finally seeing it. And also, credit has to go to the Bills front office, because his first year, he had receivers out there like Andre Holmes, undrafted Robert Foster, Zay Jones. I believe 3 of the 5 receivers aren't even in the league anymore. So now he has John Brown, Cole Beasley, Stephon Diggs, a rookie Gabriel Davis. You know, he has tools to work with, and he has taken the steps that you would have expected the number 7 overall pick to take. And as a possible MVP, I would say absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, his numbers through the first 2 weeks, obviously 14 games to go, a lot can happen. But the other thing is, the Bills have changed their offensive outlook. They were more of a ground and pound, more conservative type of offense. But yesterday, they're up 4 with 3 minutes to go at the 50-yard line. It's 3rd and 9. Instead of running a 4-yard gain and then punting and leaving it to your defense, they throw a 50-yard bomb to John Brown. So basically, they're now comfortable with living and dying with Josh Allen's arm. That's what they're telling you right there. They have confidence in their quarterback, and it's really great to see because he was such a polarizing player during the draft process, and even to this day, completion percentage is so overrated. Don't even get me started about that. But you'll see the memes. You'll see the videos of him overshooting a receiver. And yes, he has to clean some of that up, but Pat Mahomes makes some terrible throws once in a while. Everybody does. So if you wanted to cut up the 5 worst throws from every quarterback, you can make every quarterback look bad if you wanted to. But this guy's potential is through the roof, and I'm so excited to see that the Bills got him, especially actually the year before Buffalo had the 10th pick. They traded it to the Chiefs. The Chiefs took Mahomes. Thankfully for Buffalo, they slid down to 27th that year, and they got Tre'Davious White. So it wasn't you weren't kicking yourself like, oh, we let Mahomes go. But they wound up getting Tre'Davious White. They wound up getting the draft capital to move up for Josh Allen the following year, and their plan is off and running. Out west, Chargers, Justin Herbert. Great to see that young man thrown into the fire and performing so well. He was another guy who I thought physically could play the part of an NFL quarterback. I loved his game coming out of college, and someone who's a smart guy, academic All-American, a 4.0 student, the number 1 student in college football last year. And to me, that says something. And he really performed well under fire. Over 300 yards, exciting. And I like Tyrod Taylor as a player and as a person from what I've seen of him over the years. But Tyrod Taylor cannot make the same type of plays that Justin Herbert did yesterday, the same type of throws. I just don't know if it's because he doesn't see the field as well. But Tyrod very rarely is able to open it up. I think his height plays a factor. He's obviously tough as nails, and he can manage a game for you. He got the Bills to the playoffs in 2017, and he's a great competitor, but he's just limited as an NFL quarterback. And if I'm the Chargers, the future is clearly Justin Herbert. I mean, I don't know how you can – it obviously shows that Anthony Lynn, as head coach, is a loyal coach, and he's loyal to Tyrod Taylor, but is he loyal to a fault? Obviously, Anthony Lynn was offensive coordinator in Buffalo with Tyrod Taylor for a year, and that's probably some of the reason why he brought him over to the Chargers. And obviously, he's sticking with him. He knows what he has in Tyrod Taylor. He probably loves Tyrod Taylor's character, and Tyrod can be a team leader. But at the end of the day, you have to put the player on the field who gives you the best chance to win. And I think the veterans, even though they may love Tyrod, they may start to see that, hey, Herbert may be the guy who gives us the best chance. And that's who they're going to want under center.
Yeah, and I think, watching the Hard Knocks, you just see, and I think Lynn talked about it too, like you just want to see the more vocal leadership from Herbert. And I think once he, after this victory, he should have the confidence to kind of assert himself as that guy. I'm not sure, that's kind of one of the criticisms coming out of the draft was his, lack of rah-rah kind of personality. But man, oh man, what an impressive performance. I'd be remiss if I didn't throw Gardner Minshew in the mix. I mean, let's not forget about him, what he did, almost rallying back to defeat the Titans, and that Minshew to Shark combination, I think, is here to stay. There's no tanking for Trevor in Jacksonville. I do want to get to the watermelon kick, they're calling it, that Wild game, John, in Dallas with the Falcons and Cowboys. Not quite sure I ever seen an onside kick that way, but it worked. And I don't know if it was just poor coaching, bad preparation, the fact that the ball was rolling the way it was. But, I mean, what the heck are the Falcons doing out there just watching the ball roll? The special teams coach, I think, should be fired. And Dan Quinn, another guy, the pride of Morristown, New Jersey, he's on the hot seat too in Atlanta.
Yeah, and I think, that was one of the things where when you look at how it was the whole throughout that entire game, once they're down with all those turnovers, that McCarthy just kept rolling the dice, with the things that he was doing. And it was like the first one didn't work, the second one didn't work, the third idea didn't work, and the last idea, with how they had practiced that onside kick, and it probably had worked against their own guys the first time they did it, not knowing what to do, with this screwball coming at you, because it looked like really the Falcons guys were blocking for CJ Goodwin to be able to come in and make the play, because they just stood there and the one guy, 85 or 87, just looked on the ground and saw the ball spinning around and didn't know what to do. And it was like the Falcons didn't realize it's the Cowboys who had to wait for 10 yards. You just have to get on it and recover it. So I don't think I've ever seen 5 guys standing around the ball and then somebody jumping through, like that in order to do that. But I think McCarthy has proven something that we were just mentioning, and you see it last week with Seattle, with how they were letting Russell Wilson now defer to him being the playmaker, rather than just handing off, or rather than just trying to finish off games where they were ahead by 7 or 10. They were putting the gas, hitting the gas pedal, there. And you mention it with, Josh Allen being given the keys to the car. And I think you see it with Seattle. You've seen it with Dallas for 2 weeks in a row, going for it on 4th down, going for a 2-point conversion, to kind of cut it to a 1-score, game, when you could just do the easy thing, there and keep the chains moving. And you've seen Kansas City and Baltimore now do it the last couple of years, to a high success rate, in terms of some of these 3rd down and short, and even some of these 4th and 1 plays. Mathematically, you have the best players, the best talent. Why not just go for it, knowing, that worst case scenario, you have a chance to hold the opposition to a field goal anyway. And we know what field goals have become in the NFL. And at the worst case, they score and you have an offense that's scoring routinely. I think you're starting to see some teams kind of play that different style, like more of a college or up-tempo, style, and have the willingness to go for it. I mean, literally yesterday, we saw teams going for it inside their own 40 on 4th down. So once you start doing things like that and you put the creativity in the hands of your coaches and you're using these quarterbacks almost like your point guard, like give them the ball, let them make the play with the ball, and we're not going to play games not to lose. We're going to play games to win. You're starting to see some of the scores be a little higher. Some of these guys that are considered their franchise player, you're putting it in their hands to make a play. And if you look back throughout the course of that game, a lot of those McCarthy, go for the gusto when you're down 29-10 and 36-24, you were sitting there going, boy, I've never seen a head coach do that before. But literally, they would never have gotten to that onside kick without how they played the rest of the game, so differently than a normal team that's down 29-10. And I think if they do it that way, the Falcons probably still win. The other way around, that was going to turn out the way that it did. And anytime somebody does something new on special teams, it normally comes out with some sort of weird, result to it. So no T, kicking it off the ground, and having it go in all directions at the same time. It looks like the Falcons guys just got kind of mesmerized, by what they were seeing, and they didn't know what to do, whereas I think normally you would teach your guys, like, get on the ball, and if we did something wrong, the worst case scenario is a penalty, and then Dallas would have had a re-kick. So if you made a mistake, at least make a mistake being aggressive. Don't make a mistake sitting there being passive, because you literally let the ball spin around right in front of you, and that was the difference between 1-1 and 0-2. And 0-2 in a division with Tom Brady and Drew Brees pretty much means almost see you next year.
Yeah, the watermelon roll got him in there for the Falcons. And speaking of the kicking game, I'm not even joking. I used to take that walk to the bathroom or go open the fridge during that extra point. Now you've got to stay tuned and make sure it goes through the uprights, because that is no longer a gimme. And these field goals, I mean, I will say this: a lot of people thought the NFL would come out of the gates low scoring due to the lack of offseason and training camp and all that. I think every team that won yesterday scored about 30, 35 points or more. One last NFL note. We'll get over to some draft risers and then preview the Monday Night Football game. But Ralph, as noted, the NFL has done a great job with COVID protocol, 0 positives around the league. However, there is a media push here for the NFL to take action against coaches not wearing the proper mask protocol on the sidelines. And I think we saw that throughout the week. You look over, some of these coaches are beginning with the mask on, but then you see them later on in the game, it's dipped down and they're talking into the microphone. The Patriots have some funny looking masks, by the way. But I'm already starting to see this morning media outrage saying, hey, the coaches are going to hear from the commissioner this week about the lack of face mask wearing.
I can understand the image of having everyone masked up on the sidelines. And I think actually in 2 markets, Buffalo being one and San Francisco being the other, actually local laws or ordinances or executive orders, whatever we have these days, mandate that those folks have to have masks on. I mean, I understand for the image, but when you sit back and think about it, we shouldn't be that outraged if Bill Belichick has his mask at his chin while he's yelling in a play, because of the environment that the NFL has set up. 0 positive tests amongst 3,000 plus personnel last week. So they're ensuring that the folks on that field aren't carrying the virus. So theoretically, they don't need a mask. A mask would, of course, be extra precaution. There's an image, there's a message that you send when you're wearing the mask. And also, it does, in the small percentage that someone had a false negative test or someone is asymptomatic and carrying the virus, and the small percentage that is happening, the mask would be further prevention. But if you're putting a bunch of people who are supposedly clean on the field, and they're all clean and they don't have the virus, how are they going to transmit the virus amongst one another? Now, when they go back home and then they come on the field, I get it, but that's why they have still the daily testing in the NFL. They said they were going to stop the daily testing if the positivity rate dropped below 5%. Well, the positivity rate is near 0, but they're still doing the daily testing because they want to make sure that everyone is clean. And the other thing is, with the mask, it's just an extra precaution that they're taking. In my opinion, the NFL is being super, super safe, and they're going a little overboard. But they want to be in a position where they're guaranteed to play all 17 weeks, and they don't want to be in a position where somebody can say, hey, I told you so, or hey, the NFL didn't do this, and that's why this game's canceled. The NFL didn't do that. So really, they're taking every measure they can, and they're probably going a little overboard. And if you look at it logically, you shouldn't be as offended by Bill Belichick not wearing his mask. Now, fans in the stands, if they don't have the mask on, I can see people being more upset over that. But as far as the players, if he just had a negative test, kind of what's the difference? But I do understand the extra precaution. With that said, great to see a lot of fans in the stands at that Dallas game, a few fans in the stands in the Miami game, pretty much like a normal home game for them. But it's good to see teams are slowly moving toward that. They're doing it responsibly with the mask wearing, with the reduced capacity. And I mean, if you have 1/5 of the people who you have a building that's built for 80,000, you have 1/5 of the people in there. That's 1/5 of the people using the bathrooms, 1/5 of the people going through squeezing through the turnstiles. Bottom line, it's completely doable. You can follow all the CDC guidelines with the reduced capacity crowd.
John, I'm curious to get your thoughts. Is this a overreaction by the media mask patrol, or will the NFL coaches be hearing from the commissioner this week?
I mean, I think they'll hear from the commissioner, regardless, because it's an image factor, thing. But I think, what gets out of control is the factor that you can't generalize what's happening on an NFL sideline and then compare it, like to everyday life, right? So if you see people complaining that you're seeing something that now looks abnormal, on a football sideline, that they have it on, then they have it off, and then they don't realize it's off because they're in the midst of doing their job, and things like that. Okay, well, let's not try to compare that to average Joe who's in Walmart who does or doesn't want to wear his mask, right? And I think so the complaints that you're seeing are by, the average person or the media that wants to say, well, like, hey, if we're all doing it, it means all. Okay, well, that's fundamentally, one way of looking at it, as opposed to saying, well, we're all not taking rapid tests. We're all not being tested daily. We're all not, doing the things that, we're not getting our temperature taken at the door, the way that those people are. They're being taken a temperature at the door, taking one when they leave, wearing a bracelet, that gives you the contact tracing of who you've been around, throughout the course of the day. So if someone gets sick, they can trace it back, to who's been around, and such. And you're seeing, them take the highest level of precaution to where in the NCAA, a head coach tests positive, and he's immediately removed from the entire situation, for 10 to 14 days. So I think it's a little bit, over the top to me, just in the sense of if you're comparing what you're seeing on a football field when they're taking all those precautions and doing all those things, well, the everyday person is not. They're not going through all that. You're not taking your temperature, walking into Walmart, walking out. You're not, taking daily tests at your house every day to make sure you're covered. So for the people that want to say, well, if I have to do it to live my everyday life, well, then this NFL coach, should be doing it on the sideline. I think that's getting a little north of, what it needs to be. But in all reality, the NFL will at least, have to make it seem like they're dealing with it from a public perspective and a health perspective, to not have the rollbacks of what they've been allowed to do in terms of the offices, the games, the Cowboys having 20%, I think, of their, capacity crowd. So, they'll have to enforce something with a slap on the wrist, and then probably a second or third offense would get to the point where they're either not going to be allowed on the sideline or within camera view, of these things, because, the eye in the sky, just like game film doesn't lie, you can't kind of avoid, them seeing you high five guys coming off the field or, calling the play, and you're right there, with it. So, while not everyone wants to look like, the drive-through attendant like Andy Reid, the other coaches have to kind of get used to the factor that you got to have something on, or you got to at least appeal to, what the NFL is saying, because it's not about yourself. It's really about everybody else. And if they're seeing it on TV, you're just adding to the components of the average Joe who says, well, then I don't want to wear it to Walmart.
All right, the state of football here. Rick Serritella, Ralph Ventre, John Murphy. Before we get into our Monday night preview, John, the one team we didn't talk about, it seems like it's just become a normal thing. The Ravens steamroll again, and suddenly the Texans, speaking of 0-2, here they are. You talk about wasting Daniel Jones' career. Well, Deshaun Watson, he's not too far behind.
Yeah, and then they're another team that this week, they're on the road heading to the Steelers. So clearly not given the best of schedule. When you get Kansas City, Baltimore back-to-back, and then on the road against Pittsburgh. But the most interesting scenario for me, especially seeing what was said about him, where it's unbelievable to think that there was a time and place where there was a question of what position Lamar Jackson should play. It's not that far ago that people said, can this guy play quarterback in the NFL? Will he be an NFL quarterback? Okay, so over the past 12 regular season games, he has a 29-1 touchdown to interception ratio in his last 12 regular season games. And over the course of the last full season that he played, because they were so good, he didn't play a game last year in the regular season. Last 17, it's 40-6. And that includes one game with 3 and one game with 2. So he has literally played 14 out of his last 17 NFL games clean with no interceptions, in those games. And you look at what has been able to been accomplished in that period of time in the regular season. If you take that with their ground game and how well they're playing on defense, and Harbaugh with their kicker and their special teams that don't make a lot of errors and they don't get a lot of penalties, that's a team that regular season is going to be really hard to beat. If they play like that in the regular season, it will be the added passing attack that is the difference maker to them getting too much further. Can they get too much further in the playoffs will be them playing a little different style of football stylistically to give themselves an out. If in a playoff caliber game, the run game, stiffens a little bit, from the opponent they're in, they're going to have to make some one-on-one catches that they did not make, last year in the playoffs. But this is a team that if you got Lamar Jackson and those weapons and that ground attack, and you're not turning the ball over, they're going to make a lot of teams look like they've made the Texans and the Browns, look like. And that's probably not, then a division that's winnable, by anybody else. The Steelers would be hoping for, a wild card berth, because if you don't turn the ball over and you run the clock the way that they run the clock on teams with your quarterback and whoever gets the ball, right? The first week it was, one running back and Dobbins scored. Yesterday it was more Gus Johnson, and Mark Ingram, doing it. So the factor that you have 4 different guys that could lead your team in rushing, and they're going to just eat up that time of possession with that defense, they're going to be a really hard team to beat on a weekly basis. And the Bill O'Briens are headed to the Steelers and possibly looking at 0-3. And then we're going to be, be real interesting to hear what folks have to say about it, at 0-3 when, thus far it just doesn't look like they have enough to be a contender against the better teams, in the AFC. They've come up short 2 weeks in a row. That's your measuring stick, Kansas City and Baltimore. And you were barely in either of those games.
Yeah, sometimes it helps to have a GM if you're the Houston Texans. Shout out, you mentioned Gus Edwards. Got to give a shout out now to Rutgers, the former Miami Hurricane transfer. They're leading the Ravens in rushing yesterday. And I'll say one last thing about Lamar Jackson. He reminds me of Steve Young in a lot of ways. And I think until he wins that Super Bowl, he will not get the respect that he deserves. But very similar. All right. Winding down, we've got Monday Night Football tonight, Ralph. Michael Thomas out for the New Orleans Saints. You've seen that line now move. It was up to about 6. This morning I wake up, it's down to about 4. Las Vegas is my AFC Super Bowl prediction. So I think this is going to be a close matchup. How do you see the game tonight between the Saints and the Raiders?
Well, Saints going east to west. always an interesting factor, although it's not for your normal Sunday game. Really, I'm looking forward to a good primetime football game. I'm not as high on the Raiders as you are, but I think that they are improved. They have some exciting athletes. Josh Jacobs, for one, and the tight end, Waller's a phenomenal player. And then the Saints, really, I think you're going to see a different type of Saints team. Well, really, they've kind of been different in the past few years. They're not the air raid offense anymore. Drew Brees throwing it 50 times a game. Drew isn't going to sniff 5,000 yards this year. And especially with Michael Thomas out, I believe they may have another injury, but their number one pass catcher, their number one offensive player is hurt. And I think you may see a run-first approach. You may see a grind-it-out type game tonight. Josh Jacobs on one side, Kamara on the other side, and I don't know which way to go as far as a side to pick, but I think it's going to be an entertaining football game. Saints-Raiders, Monday night, brand new stadium. I'm sure they'll talk about that for at least half of the broadcast. But not a bad Monday night matchup. I don't know how John feels, but I kind of dig it.
Well, you did a great job doing a Thurman Thomas impersonation there, the elusiveness with the prediction. John, how do you see the Saints and Raiders playing out? Ralph calls it a close game. I would tend to agree.
Yeah, I think the most interesting stat, for this is, which is surprising when you think of all the things you think about the Saints, is they have not given up a 100-yard rusher since 2017. So now a lot of that, at times, not to take away from their defense, is because of the score of the game. So there's plenty of times where some of the scores of those games has been out of touch. So teams get away from the run. But if that happens again and the streak continues, that will lead the game to be much more, in the direction of the Saints. And from a personal standpoint, I wouldn't mind finishing 14-2 this week. So the Saints would help me get to 14-2. So that'd be a good one. But I think you're right. It's more Kamara, probably more with Murray, seeing more touches than normal. It'll be interesting to see who, not named Emmanuel Sanders, Jared Cook, or Kamara, gets some touches. Here, is there somebody else that can make a play or two, for them? Is this a lot more of adding in the Taysom Hill, scenario for them? But I think some of the matchups there, Ruggs not at 100%, who, if not him, who are they going to, on that side? And it'll be interesting to see Carr going against a better pass rush and what the Saints are trying to do, on those second and third downs. If the Raiders stay out of long, second and third and long, I think we're, getting ourselves a good Monday night football game. But I still think at the end of the day, the rosters are still not as balanced. Gruden helps, to a certain degree, but we need, again, we said it about certain quarterbacks, and I think he definitely gets just drove. He's not nearly as bad as how a lot of the critics make Derek Carr out to be. He was near 70% completion last year. And I just think he kind of takes a lot of the situations that he's dealt with as a young quarterback out there between coaching and personnel and everything else there. He's a pretty good quarterback, overall when he's in this kind of situation with Jacobs, and the guys they're trying to surround him with. But I think if they stay out of those long second and third and long plays, we got ourselves a 4-quarter game. But I still think it's about a 6 or 8 point, Saints victory at the end of the day, with it. But I do believe that the Raiders and Chargers, somebody of those two is going to make a real push, for one of those playoff spots, and not necessarily just the last extra playoff spot. One of those two has a shot, to put themselves in contention to be a 9-win team.
Hold up. Hey, it's the Raiders day, baby. I got news for you. Oakland, or I should say Las Vegas, is coming to play tonight. I see it the other way. By the way, John, what are you, 13-2 right now? I'm one game behind you, 12-3. I've got the Raiders. I can't get on board with the eye mascara, but David Carr is the modern day Brad Johnson for John Gruden. You're going to see a coming out party for Henry Ruggs tonight. He's going to announce himself as one of the best deep ball threats in the NFL. And this is going to be Raider Nation, baby, minus the fans. A shame that there will be no fans in that magnificent, beautiful stadium that they constructed so quickly there on the Las Vegas Boulevard. So I am going with the Raiders. I think this game is going to be a lot closer than people think. In fact, I will say it's going to be 26-24. The Raiders edge out the Saints and continue that path to the Super Bowl. I'm trying to tell them, everybody out there listening, I know I didn't even get on my Cardinals high horse today. I'm going to save that for David Turner later in the week. But the Raiders are the real deal. I've been trying to tell you guys. Eventually, you will see. How many weeks it will take, I don't know. But eventually, you'll come around. Maybe next Monday when Ralph's circling those wagons, he'll come around on my Raiders. But we will tune in tonight. We'll talk about that tomorrow with Russell Landy, who will be our guest. We'll dive into some of our NFL draft prospect watch from over the weekend. And it's been another hour of power here winding down. We were so fortunate to have the assistant commissioner of the Northeast Conference and Ralph Ventre. Make sure you follow him at NEC. Ralph, parting shot for the people here before we wrap it up.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I must confess I am a fan of Richie Incognito, New Jersey native. I believe he's starting at left guard for the Raiders now. It's kind of amazing. He still has something in the tank. Obviously, he's been a bit of a controversial figure. But I look at him as someone who has been given actually a couple second chances, and he's making good on it, thankfully. But now I got to give my NEC guys a plug right here for the parting shots. Shout out to Jacob Dolegala. He got picked up by the New England Patriots. Second-year quarterback. He'll be on their practice squad. He is a 6'6" guy with pro potential. I'm interested to see what Belichick does with him. I think he'll hang around the league for a while. He was on the 53-man all last season for the Cincinnati Bengals, former All-NEC quarterback, actually from Hamburg, New York, a suburb of Buffalo, went to Central Connecticut, and now he's back in New England with the Pats. So shout out to Jake, a good guy. Glad to see him getting an opportunity, or his opportunity continuing at the NFL level. And Buffalo Bills, Josh Allen, first Bills quarterback to go over 400 passing yards since 2002. Peerless Price was a top target on that 2002 team. Drew Bledsoe was the quarterback. And my NEC connection here is a shout out to friend of the NEC, Kevin Gilbride. Kevin Gilbride was the offensive coordinator of the 2002 Buffalo Bills. And a lot of people don't know that that team to this day holds a number of Bills single-season offensive records. They broke all the records from the Kelly era Bills in that 2002 season, and they really had a couple incredible offensive displays that year with Eric Moulds, Peerless Price, Drew Bledsoe, and of course Kevin Gilbride calling the plays. I got a lot of respect for that man. People don't realize he did it in Houston. He did it in Jacksonville with Mark Brunell. He did it in Buffalo with Drew Bledsoe, and then 2 Super Bowls with the Giants. So anytime I can give him a shout out, there you go. A little love for the NEC, for Jacob Dogala, NEC alumnus, and then Kevin Gilbride, friend of NEC football.
Way to bring it back around again. Yeah, you forget Kevin Gilbride, the various pit stops, obviously the 2 Super Bowl victories with the G-Men under Tom Coughlin, one of the better modern-day play callers of the NFL era. All right, Johnny, we'll be back tomorrow. What do you got here? Parting shot for the people.
Yeah, well, we saw, all weekend we saw injuries, pretty much take over the conversation. But one injury in particular at least brought you probably the best play of the weekend. And that one happened in the Pittsburgh-Syracuse game over the weekend, where the Syracuse starting quarterback, got knocked out temporarily in the contest. And who entered the game? Rex Culpepper entered the game at quarterback after 3 years of battling cancer and getting himself back, to the point where he's back on the team and able to play. And you saw them on a third down play. Rex Culpepper dropped back, throwing about a 30 to 40-yard touchdown pass. And I don't think there were too many clear eyes on the sideline of Syracuse, even in a game where they were clearly a little overmatched and losing. But to see a kid be able to come back, and defeat something like that, get himself back on the field, and in a moment where they put him in, not only does he return to the field, but returns to the field and throws a touchdown pass. At least we saw one good thing come out of an injury over the weekend, and that was Rex Culpepper for Syracuse getting to throw a touchdown pass after overcoming cancer. And that's just an amazing thing to see for that young man, and a great job by the University of Syracuse, allowing him to maintain his spot on the team throughout all of this, and then come back and be on the field and do that on Saturday.
Yeah, no, outstanding point, and great story there. We'll talk more college football tomorrow when we have Russell Landy on. And also, we planned on spending more time on the injuries, but the lack of practices, the lack of preseason. I think the biggest difference really was, when you have preseason, the starters are kind of on a pitch count. They only play so many snaps. So you see the injuries kind of spread out through the 3 or 4 preseason games. So I don't think there's more injuries. I think there's just more injuries happening faster, because where the preseason you kind of saw it spread out over a month time, we're diving right into action. And look at this list: Saquon Barkley, Nick Bosa, Jimmy Garoppolo, Drew Lock, Anthony Barr, Devontae Adams. I mean, talk about a mash unit. The hits just keep on coming. We keep on coming at you. Weekdays, 9 a.m. Eastern, the state of football. Shout out to our panel today for Ralph Ventre, NEC, Ralph, John Murphy at DraftJM13, and myself, Rick Serritella at NFL Draft Bible. We'll be back at it again tomorrow, everybody. Thanks for tuning in.